Hello, I'm Sarah Taylor, and today my guest on Confessions of a Modern Mystic is Ishtar Ashaya. So I've got your bio here. You're my second guest in this series, and with my first guest, I did the same. I was like, "Oh, what's your bio?" Um, my guest today is Ishtar, a meditation teacher, mystic, and intuitive astrologer whose path was shaped by an early near-death experience, which we're going to go into. And as a teenager, he turned deeply towards meditation and contemplative practice. Your path deepened through
Mhm.
Vedanta, through the influence of Yogananda, which I love. Um, in your late teens, you were introduced to ascension meditation,
Mm.
and you went on to become a monk, a teenage monk. And over time, the awakening that happened when you were 13 in that near-death experience began to stabilize, will begin to open up more,
Mm.
began to stabilize and become abiding.
Yeah.
Um, and so you work as an astrologer, you're a mystic, you're profoundly psychic, you're a dear friend and a soul brother. And I'm so happy that you're here. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I'm glad to
Yeah.
be here.
Yeah. So how do you define mystic? What is a mystic to you?
A mystic to me typically is somebody who's having, who's prone to having an awful lot of unitive experiences. A mystic is somebody who's sort of quite susceptible to bliss often. Quite susceptible to of walking in between worlds. Quite acceptable for having typically not just experiences of silence, which is the base of it, ultimately, I think. But a lot of mystics don't necessarily start there, or they don't recognize that as part of the experience at first. They might have childhood experiences with angels, or
Yeah.
maybe they're discarnate spirits or fairies, or simply are seeing auras or having a lot of that
Mhm.
other phenomenon going. But ultimately, that heart of a mystic is that trajectory, that where that train is trying to go is more like Saint Teresa of Avila territory. You know,
Yeah.
Uh, uh,
Full
uh,
awakening.
yes, yeah,
Unity with God, with reality as God. Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
just soaked in, like if that was a pancakes, the mystic would be having an awful lot of blissy maple syrup on top of them. In addition, that's
That
yeah.
sounds, well, I'm hungry now, so thank you for that.
Mhm.
Well, bliss, I mean, are you narrowly just talking about that state of warmth and tingling and expansion and divine love, or can bliss take on different shapes? And the reason why I ask this is because I meet a lot of mystics who actually don't experience a lot of bliss,
Right,
but are
right,
experiencing the multi-dimensional nature of reality or God, and are like, when do we get to the bliss part? You know?
right. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, one I think bliss does take in a lot of shapes, but two, maybe more importantly, perhaps my own biases are probably getting in there, and I think that
No, I like it.
people will have. I mean, we look at the term Satchitananda from out of Sanskrit. We have sort of three qualities that are given to something that apparently you can't really describe with qualities, but we're human beings, and so we have to try. And Ananda, bliss, is only one of them.
It's
Some
only
people
one of
will
them.
have when they're having these awakening experiences for whatever reason, they'll have more of a chit kind of awakening, which is more defined by just this beautiful, pristine clarity and sort of like very metaphorical language, but the light's coming on, the light that is brighter than the brightest light, a light that's beyond dualistic light and dark.
Yeah.
Some have more of a sat awakening, and I often describe the sat of nervous system as experiencing, that which can't be experienced but can, experiencing, presence as this infinite weighted blanket, as this inviting black hole, as of course the void or the darkness, which is darker than a dualistic dark. And Ananda is like In some ways, it's like the friction between
Yeah,
those
yeah,
opposites. It is this kind of like can be a spiritual fire
yeah.
in
Emptiness
a way.
and form, Shiva and Shakti.
Yeah,
Yeah, all coming
yeah.
together. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I see a mystic as, yeah, somebody who is having these multidimensional experiences. And um, what I find is that people either fall into two camps, and tell me what you think, because you're a teacher, you are a beautiful meditation teacher, and you're also starting a school for psychic development, if we could call it that, which I want to get into.
Yeah.
Um, but there's usually two camps. There's the non-duals. I mean, if we're looking at like either ends of the spectrum, the radical non-dualists who are like, there's nobody here, there's nothing to see, there's nothing to be, none of it is real.
Yeah.
And then you have this camp over here that is, maybe we could call it new agey, which is into everything, aliens and interdimensional travel and parallel lives and energy and Shakti and healing. And I find that the camp over here with the radical non-dual are missing out on a juicy, multidimensional experience of life.
Yeah.
And sometimes people over here in this camp are missing the point of the spiritual path, which is that being united with the one thing, with Brahman, with
Yes.
God, with Source. So, how do you see the dance between non-duality and these multidimensional ways of experience
Mhm.
life coming together and helping each other?
Yeah, sure. Okay. And sometimes I'll not to insult anyone, but sometimes like in we're calling that community the non-duality community, and part of its shortcoming often is that it's actually not particularly non-dual, and a lot of the teaching from that space, if we were to really break it down, is often people at best, in the best case, who have this, her mind has found a genuine rock solid experience of that which doesn't change. That they have fallen into that pristine, deep, immovable everythingness.
Yep,
But it just why it would remain dual is if some people have that experience, and then the rest of the world is still, whatever the fuck,
exactly. That's
if
just
you
the
have.
rest of the world. Yeah,
Yeah, if you fall into a place where it's kind of like, and this is actually not a dig because it's a beautiful place to be. To know actually, to have an experience, an abiding experience of samadhi in some sense, it's wonderful. I mean, come on. But if it remains samadhi and then bullshit, or samadhi and maya, to be more scholarly about it, but
exactly.
I'm
Yeah,
translating that to the street language here, samadhi and bullshit, then it's just not done yet. There's just because ultimately is that if one keeps going in practice, and sometimes different practices come in at different stages for different people, or practice changes dynamic, but if one keeps going, that samadhi starts to show up in the table or in the strangers one is encountering, or in one
yeah,
significant other, or in the plants that are hanging on
yeah,
the wall behind you, or the giant amethyst over there in the corner.
yeah.
And
Or the dog poop on the sidewalk, or paying our
yes,
taxes, or
or
being in
wars.
a or disagreement with our loved one and trying to see eye to eye. It's it's everywhere. It begins to permeate everywhere. Yeah, and I find that people that are really in that kind of radical camp, they've had their first taste. And that sort of lends itself well to kind of escapism and kind of ignoring this realm of existence, which also means kind of ignoring these unseen realms
Yes, yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
And that I will not, I don't name names because I'm not to knock anyone, but I remember I was in a meditation class, and it was one of a class of my ilk, Ascension Meditation. I was sitting in the class, and I was trying not to be, I was not teaching, I was sort of auditing. And I actually really didn't want to be a pain in the ass or somebody who was coming in. And so I kept my mouth shut most of the time, and I wanted to be respectful. But I remember one of the students was sharing what was obviously, it didn't take Jung to listen to this and know this is a profound dream with wisdom, bullseye straight from the capital S self.
Uh-huh. They were relating
And
a dream that they
they were
had.
relating a dream. They were relating a dream, and it was so obviously we'll call it a prophetic dream, but a dream that's a
Sure.
clear message, you know, and they got kind of poo-pooed for it,
Sure.
and told like, don't pay attention to the dream. It's just Maya
Who
or
is the
whatever.
one that is dreaming?
That.
What was there behind the dream? Yeah. Hmm.
And I came
Which,
in
yeah.
because that I was you know, and I came in and just trying not to be an asshole, but basically saying like, you know, I didn't want to be the well actually guy, but you know,
Well,
kind of
actually,
I came in saying like, no, do listen to that. That is profound. If you find yourself in that space again, especially and you're lucid, surf that wave and see what happens. You
yeah.
know, and so that's just an example. Have experienced many such examples where like even people who aren't just in their head, which is another thing about the current non-dual community. Some people actually aren't
Yeah.
experiencing samadhi. They're kind of been trained to do
They've
mental.
intellectualized it and yeah.
Yeah. Jnana doesn't mean from your lower intellect. That jnana really is a different thing. It means perception from some, you know, it's perception from samadhi that gives root to jnana, not just being smart.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Book smart
yeah.
and attending a lot of sat songs and listening to a lot of YouTube teachers.
No, yeah, that's right. Yeah, mainlining those YouTube
Yeah.
videos or whatever.
I gotta
Uh,
get my latest.
you
Oh wait,
know,
what's this? A new video. I know, which we don't want to knock it. This is coming out on
no,
YouTube. Please like and subscribe.
please.
But
But yeah, that's on that side, of course, that's where they need to move. And on the side of, I mean, I came up, whatever that means. I feel like at age 13 and 14, after an NDE and after kind of forgetting about it, I waltzed into a middle late 90s metaphysical bookstore, which I have to tell people here is those were the days.
those were great.
Those were great, and I they basically let me, as long as I didn't damage any book, because I knew as a kid I didn't have much money. Let me read all the books in there, and I met all these like brilliant psychics and qigong teachers and genuine energy healers, and you know people who do have shit coming out of their hands beyond beyond you fooling yourself. And so I was in that community, and it's lovely, of course. But what's often lacking, of course, is that it's if you need to find that ground of being,
Yeah,
or you need to find that thing that doesn't change, that as a reference point, the
yeah,
still point in the turning axle of the world, as T.S. Eliot called it, and you know, having that point, the truth that's present in all of these other experiences on the carousel of actual genuine woo and high strangeness are contextualized in the best way possible, and are mined for the experiential truth in them, as opposed to just being this big scattershot of craziness
yeah,
or high strangeness. And
yeah.
also, you know, you can be very psychic, of course, and still be suffering profoundly existentially.
Oh
You know,
yeah. I mean,
that
I
is
people are students are surprised when I say like, don't just because somebody has psychic abilities doesn't mean they're awake. Doesn't mean that they've opened up into unitive consciousness and
no,
have disidentified with the separate self.
no.
It's just they happen to have gifts. And just
Yes,
because somebody has opened up into unity and may perhaps it's abiding doesn't necessarily mean they have psychic
no,
abilities that are
no,
pronounced either. So it's going to be
no.
different for everyone, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love crystal shops. As you know, I have worked in crystal shops as an energy healer and an intuitive reader. I never liked the word psychic, but yeah, I mean, after Buddhism, you know, or my Buddhist path failed to kind of, and the resources I had at the time were not sort of showing up to help me understand Kundalini awakening, the huge
Mhm.
universal healing energies
Yeah.
that were pouring through me and out my hands, and the dead people showing up in my living room, and the prophetic dreams, and the all the psychic stuff that was opening up. I turned to crystal shops and then ended up working there. So I love this. I have this. My base, my foundation is the Buddhist path of waking up to your true nature,
Yeah.
and I'm a little bit woo. I'm probably a
Yeah.
lot woo. So, but to me, they come together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
I mean, after all, what is unity, non-duality? I mean, it includes everything. It's the great totality. And we can be fooling ourselves and be prone to imagination and fantasy, but then there's still some degree of clinging then, and there's still, mind veils that are in action. If I think when and we can get into this more, but tuning into psychic phenomena, I always feel like somebody should, or it's helpful to release outcome expectation, release any demands, agendas, and just open and receive
Yes,
from that empty, spacious, still point, if it's possible, you know?
that's I think that's the best way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go back. You're a kid and you're having these
Yeah.
experiences as a child in your room, and then I think that people will want to hear about what happened when you were 13.
Absolutely. Uh, I think I was born probably with a lot of clarity of samadhi, but without knowing that that was what was going on. Or, when you're an infant, you're just kind of touching the furniture, and getting to know things. But in that crib of mine, I was touching the furniture, but I also had this kind of big sort of spacious awareness and a sense that not only was I in my own body, but I was in the wall across from me and the space and my pillow and my little blanket and on the side of the crib and my parents and my sister. And there was something of me in all of the things. That's how the
Yeah.
experience was for a while. And I think that that was indicative of a more general opening of other faculties that we all have. And so, like for instance, of ghosts were happening. That was something that was going on. There was certainly some kind of I think almost all kids are really deeply empathic.
Oh,
I mean, you
yeah,
have to be to
for sure.
survive. And then we all just have different biographies, so it kind of shuts down in different ways to different degrees. But that was something too. Is one of the reasons I didn't necessarily want to acquire language at first. I remember being a mute baby in my crib, but I wasn't mute on the inside. And even though I
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily using language to process thought, I was kind of using pictures or impulses of what
Oh,
I would
yeah.
call now impulses of consciousness. I wouldn't have had a word back then, but I didn't want to learn language because I could tell that the things coming out of my parents' mouth and what I actually felt was really wanting to be communicated were not always the same. And so I had this uh, you know, non-linguistic opinion that perhaps I shouldn't be getting into the the
Language,
language
the language
business,
game.
the
Yeah.
language game, or something like that. Of course, eventually I acquiesced, but it's because you have to. And it was also seemed interesting as a kid, and I feel very lucky to have had really good parents and a really wonderful sister, and everybody very loving. Nothing anywhere close to ever abuse or meanness. So I was lucky that there was a very soft landing. And so, picking up language and, learning how to use a toilet and, learning some etiquette and protocol, all those things we have to learn,
Learning how to be
were
human now that you
learning
were
how to
in
be human.
form, you had incarnated.
It was pleasant enough. So, to do it. But anyways, that stuff was going on, especially the ghost for some reason. And I don't know, it wasn't like the only person I felt like particularly telepathic with, actually my mother, I have to say, but the person I felt the most telepathic was my sister. And which I always thought was very nicer because she's like older by 7 years. So I thought like, oh, I get to hang out in my big sister's room now.
Yeah.
This is pretty cool. But we would play that what number am I thinking game. I
Hmm.
would do very well at it, you know. So I felt like I was a twin, but 7 years removed in a way for a while. I
Yeah.
felt like
Yeah.
there was that shared wavelength that was going on. But maybe it was because I was born in the sign of Scorpio and I was born on Halloween
Oh God,
that
that's right. Your birthday's
yeah, I
Halloween. I
think
love that
the
about you.
the birthday theme extended the entire year. So I just remembered people walking into my room at a certain point, and I realized what they were. No, I it wasn't necessarily fun. And I think my nervous system could get jarred, especially if it was, an unexpected,
Yeah.
person standing at the foot of my bed or something like that. Or usually didn't get that close. Somehow I had a nice little force field, but they would, be still 12 feet away, somebody with like a bizarre face, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just remembering, yeah, like the foot of my bed, like waking up and being like, there are three beings there, and like what, and being freaked out by it,
Yeah, that's
it's like,
yeah. So yeah, that was going on, and I somehow I had sort of an instinctual sense of what to do,
ah,
and I'm very grateful those instincts came through in a lot of different situations. But I would eventually I would go and if I could, I would sit in this little rocking chair that I had, and then I would have them sit across from me, and I would put on my Sherlock Holmes hat that I had, and put in the fake pipe, and I would, like then from there I would like go into this, close my eyes, and I would find myself going into this big, sort of like a chit space, a big brightness,
yeah,
big vast brightness, and somehow I had a sense that somehow I'd say, now come into the room, as if it was moving into the space in front of me. I would let it be there, and I would kind of feel whatever being had been in front of me. I would feel them sort of dissolve into it, or like move in it, and then I knew, okay, done. And I'd open my eyes, and the room felt as if it had been cleaned by magical fairy dust.
What do you
And
think was happening?
I basically think that I was sort of somehow projecting, I was projecting samadhi in some way, or I was inviting it to move, or inviting it to be more obvious, to them. And I would, you know, and so that's why, like, spirits don't necessarily, spirits that don't want to leave do not like to hang around pujas or meditation classes or
Yeah,
things like that, because like that samadhi is just it's gonna loosen whatever resistance they have. They
they'll
will
go into the light, or
they will quote
it'll,
unquote go
yeah,
into the light,
yeah,
yeah, or something of that case, and
yeah,
so
yeah,
they'll transition. So that's what I think was going on.
yeah,
Uh,
beautiful. So maybe you were helping them cross over.
yeah, I took it on as my job, and so thankfully I had at the time I really loved the Ghostbusters. I had to watch that movie. Now I really know why. I had to watch that movie every day. Bugged the hell out of my sister. And like my mother told her, he's got to watch the movie. It's the only thing that'll calm him down.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and so
You were such a uniquely wired kid. Yeah.
I now looking back, I realize, okay, that was me making all this phenomena psychologically okay, because I could
Yeah.
channel an irreverent Bill Murray in a way, in the face of this, or a
Yeah.
cerebral Egon Spengler,
Right.
or a Kier, and channel the Ghostbusters qualities and be okay. And then I was also enamored with Jeremy Brett's role as Sherlock Holmes in the 1980s Granada series that we saw on PBS, and I loved Holmes
Yeah.
to death. And so that's why I tried to turn my
Mysteries.
yes, I tried to turn my room. At the time I was like, I like Sherlock Holmes, but he'd be even cooler if he were psychic. And so I thought like psychic Sherlock Holmes would be the best, because it's not enough to just be super logical. Anybody can do that, and be a genius, but not anybody can,
Yeah,
see through
have
time and
both.
space and have
Look at
both. Yeah,
that. Non-dual. Wow, you were embracing that already.
yes,
Wait,
yeah,
were you calling it psychic? Did you
yeah.
know?
I knew the
Yeah,
term
so you
psychic pretty
knew the
early.
term psychic as a kid.
Yeah, by about age 5, if not before. But another wonderful thing was that in that period, and I'm dating myself, it was the 80s. There were these wonderful Time Life books that like a big set of thin Time Life books
Oh,
on
yeah, we had those.
mysteries, and you had those too. Yeah, the 70s. I know they were
Yeah.
out. There was a bunch of them in the children's section of the Lake Geneva Public Library, and my sister read a few of them to me, or would just go through the pictures and say, oh, read the caption and tell me about the things. And so yeah, that psychical stuff. Uh,
Yeah.
Reading those books was really helpful, because it also, some of them gave me context for the things I'd been experiencing.
Yeah,
Uh,
context and normalizing it and to
mhm.
some degree. It's yeah, because
Yes.
as a kid, a lot of mystical kids, they feel like they're alone and they have no context for it. And they don't have maybe a loving environment, not everybody,
No.
that encourages them. It sounds like your sister encouraged you and nobody was freaked out in your household about it.
No, and like a good Scorpio, I did keep a lot of things close to my chest, even if I
Yeah.
maybe didn't have to. But even so, it was interesting. I grew up in a largely atheist, scientific, materialist sort of household, and
Yeah.
yet it wasn't like harsh in that way. It was more free thinking, agnostic, in the uh, tolerance. Like
That's
for
good.
instance, maybe the Bible and Christianity, I have to say, we're looked down upon for all the historical atrocities, etc. But and yet no, but like stuff like psychical things, which have had been researched and had some little bits of
Yeah.
evidence known by the general public. Those are more accepted. It was also acceptable to have an imagination, and so I might know I was encouraged to to imagine things and so to me I lumped a lot of the experiences I had. It was like, what? Where's just my imagination? So, I won't
Yeah.
take it for too many grains of salt. And but for my own psychological health wellness, I need
That's
to do these
healthy.
rituals.
Yeah.
So I'd be like, when the imaginary ghost comes in, I got to go sit in the chair and close my eyes and go into that big vast space and do the thing,
Yeah.
I treated it like it was a game in a way,
A
and
game
that
that was really kind of a spiritual practice. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think allowed me not to get too tight, not to get too frightened, and not to get sort of overwhelmed by all that stuff.
And it sounds like you held it loosely in all your 8-year-old, 6-year-old wisdom, and that's the key to opening up to the imaginal realm, which doesn't mean that it's all
No,
imagination, right?
no, no,
Um,
yeah.
but certainly exercising imagination does tend to help us open to our mystical nature. Not that we're making stuff up,
Yes.
but don't you find that?
Of course, yeah, and that's people who are like doing Jungian practices or
Yeah.
scholars of Jungian stuff or in that milieu. Today, I mean, there are more examples than one could count of people having synchronicitous daydreams
Oh yeah.
or precognitive daydreams. That was certainly a very common thing for me was
Yeah.
no one told me not to daydream. I never got in trouble for that. Thankfully, I was like a very good student, so I was one who got their homework done, and I had 30 minutes to kill, and no one was pissed that I was staring out a window.
Yeah.
And so
That's
that was
great.
so wonderful because I would tune out, and sometimes I would be having just random conversations with people I didn't know. And then 2 weeks later, I've now met that person who was random in the dream
Uh-huh.
because they're the new student that comes to school, and I'm
Yeah.
having that conversation that I dreamed about. And I still have those skeptically because I'm like, well, I could be making this up retroactively.
Right.
Memory's imperfect, but when a certain number of them sort of built up, I was like, I think there's something else going on here,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I want
You
to,
really were
yeah.
blending logic and the openness, even from a young age, which is
Yeah, well, I mean,
helpful.
like, yeah, and of course I was exposed to people who are sort of also some religious, I say religious fanatics, and I was really turned off by that. I mean, I was turned off with
Extremism.
the inability to change one's mind when confronted with new evidence.
Yeah.
That always turned me off, and I didn't have a problem with people being very passionate or myself being very passionate about a certain line of thinking and perhaps even being a little bit rigid for a while. But if I couldn't turn around with enough evidence, and if I couldn't
Mhm.
hear evidence, then I thought I'm screwed. I'm not doing well. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
so that's why I thought it was important to have those mixes because I also found people who were just, so much wishful thinking.
I know.
You know,
Yeah. You'll
I
find that.
got, that made me uncomfortable. I didn't like that space. So I thought a blend of these faculties that we have seemed like a good idea. And
Yeah.
I also didn't like people who said like you have to believe in something and like or if you
Yeah.
disbelieve it won't work. I hated things that if you disbelieve it won't work. Yeah, what I liked is more scientific. Like you could disbelieve the shit out of something
Yeah.
up here and it still works. And to me that was like now you're encountering reality because reality is a thing that is happening whatever you think of it. And
Yeah.
so that's what I was interested in, That's
And that's interesting because it's such a balance. It's like I do find that when people are open and want to believe, I mean, now I feel
mm,
like Mulder, I want to believe,
yeah,
that then there's more. But what that does is it just frees you up. It just opens you to the mystery. It opens you to
yeah,
possibility. But, as the Buddhist said, like, don't take my word for it, find out for yourself, like
Yeah.
direct experience.
Yes.
And for me, when, psychic stuff started happening, it was like I didn't ask for it. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't,
Yeah.
so it's sometimes that's a little bit more of like that'll shake you more and really wake you up, so to speak. Um,
Yeah. We don't want to end up like Scully in season like 2 or 3 when the aliens are literally
of the
running
X-Files.
behind her in the X-Files. And she's like, "Well, I didn't see them."
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
essentially.
Mulder, you've been right the whole time. And then
Meanwhile,
she goes
Mulder's
back to
having
being
a yeah.
skeptical.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Also, one of the that was one of the cultural events in my life where
Oh,
I knew that I was born at the right time when that show came on in '93.
yeah.
Just another piece of evidence, like it wasn't a mistake. This is it's just something about seeing those two on TV. I was
You
like, okay,
lived to see the
yeah,
X-Files.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
The X between the X-Files, grunge, uh, Enigma and Enya,
Ooh, Enigma.
yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah, man. Well,
yeah,
take us to being 13 years old and what
yeah.
happened
So,
there.
so by 13, I think I had, I don't say mastered, but I had mastered the teenage childhood social manipulation lying game pretty well. Not like I was a bad person. And on the scale of things, I wasn't a shitty person, but I mean in the sense that almost everybody is manipulating and lying, even if they're an honest, good person.
You're a
I mean,
preteen, yeah, you're
you wanted to be
testing
liked.
limits.
No, and you want to be liked, and I wasn't necessarily very liked early on in school, and
Mm,
so like I'm 13, and it's like I think I was the most asleep that I had yet been to presence in life at that time. It was the most in the background, and I was like a
uh,
pig, like I was a pig in slop, a pig in ego development slop.
yeah,
I'd say, and
as well
which
you
is
should
great,
have
as well
been.
you should be at that time. Exactly.
Yeah,
That's what you're going
right.
for. And so I was cruising there, and then my favorite time of year was when the school year was about to end and baseball season was starting, and so I played a game, my first game of sort of preseason baseball. It's funny, little leagues have preseason. That's ridiculous, but it's like a tune-up match. And this guy with a real zinger of a fastball, I did not get out of the way far enough, and he got me right on the
Ow.
arm here. And it turned out that it was broken, and so I had to get a cast. And so that night, my big complaint about life was, poor me, I'm going to miss half of the baseball season.
Yeah.
Right. That was a big disappointment. And I remember I was talking with my mom before going to bed, and this had happened before in my life where just stuff would just come out of my mouth that it was like it was saying something through me. I wasn't saying it, and the words that came out were startling to both of us. And it was just a simple question: Are you going to die soon? I'd never asked that before, and I was never worried about that with my mom. I worried about that with my dad because he'd had like emergency gallbladder surgery in a few years before. And so she was even like a little bit, by that. And she was a very formidable woman with a very strong mind and a strong spirit. So that like I clocked that. I was like, huh.
Hmm.
And then she was okay, and then I was okay. And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, whatever. I don't know what that was. The next morning, I woke up like a cartoon character. I just like horizontal
Straight up.
to vertical, as if I was running into my body and I was out of breath. It felt like I was running somewhere. And I came up at the exact moment the two of them were outside my bedroom door. And I was so distraught. I was like, there's something I have to tell you, but I forgot what it is. I was so distraught that I'd forgotten what I was supposed to tell my parents. And they had to come in and calm me down for a few minutes. And then they went off on their walk. I went off to school, had a fine day at school, came home with some awards. Second to last day of school. That was always a fun day too.
Yeah.
Good ego padding, and came back. Then we dropped my sister off at her new workplace, and as we were pulling out, we got hit by a car. We got T-boned by a car that was going 20 over and had temporarily been hidden behind a car or two that were going the speed limit. So when we pulled out, we got hit by them, and we didn't see it coming. And I was just turning to say something to my mom, what I actually even remember what I was going to say, I was like, do we have to play Luther Vandross again? Because she wanted me to put the Luther Vandross tape, and I was like, can we do something else, you know? And we got hit, and it was in that moment that I was surprised even more because I have to say that I was really afraid of, I mean, I was quite afraid of death. I don't know on the spectrum of humanity's fear how afraid that was, but really afraid. It was something I was profoundly concerned with, and I did not want to be around for, as Woody Allen would say. And but in that moment, I wasn't afraid at all. And in fact, I thought, oh shit, and oh shit, because I was absolutely certain with how close and how big that thing was and how fast it was going that this was it. It's toast. You know, game over. And I felt like I was descending into something big. And on my way down, I had like one more thought. It was like I was the thought coming out of the well, you know, like, huh, I really thought this one was going to go more than 13 years. You know, it's like somebody had made a script change that I wasn't aware of, you know, right after saying that, it was like I was brought into a full life review, and I'd known about those. I was extremely skeptical that of like what people were reporting. I thought they must be like unintentionally embellishing. How can you have the entire memory of your life in the kind of detail these people are saying happen in like a half a second? It just seemed I was very incredulous about it, and there it was. And indeed it was a the that watching of the life was both a watching and a full immersive experiencing, and it was
Yeah.
more immersive than any time, any moment that I could have picked out. I was more present for my life post facto
Yeah.
than the living of it. And not only that, I mean, not everything that people report I experienced, but I remembered like the sense of these unitive experiences in the memory, like being in multiple bodies at the same time, in the trees and the asphalt of the play, a lot of playground memories
Yeah.
for a kid,
When
slice
you're
of you.
13.
When
Yeah.
you're 13, that's a big chunk of life right there, and the stress. And so I was there with this. I don't know. I could call it God or my own higher self. To me, that's the same thing in a way. Um, or some like Jiminy Cricket Virgil from Divine Comedy character who was like guiding me through it. Like Rip Torn did not show up for people who've seen Defending Your Life, which is a film I'd
Yeah, I
seen. Rip
usually
Torn
don't
was
hear that.
yeah.
I keep waiting, but
No,
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That would have been funny. Um, and so we went through it, and the interesting thing was that it was healing because everywhere in the life where I had seized up or lied or tried to protect myself or something was seen for what it was. Like absolutely, it's like there's this objective consciousness which was just showing me the shit, and I was taking it in. There was no resistance. And because there's this profound healing balm that came with that like real crisp truth. And it felt like I was getting this like suit, too tight suit that had been put on me that I was ignorant of, like literally taken off me. And as it
Uh,
went down, it's like I felt like, oh my God, you know what have I been doing you know all this time with all that fear? You know
mhm.
look what I have done, what straitjacket I've been living in. We've all been living in, and I had
Yeah.
no idea. And so as we went, and you know, it was beautiful. I won't go into too much detail, but
Oh
by
no, to tell us more. I remember, you and I are dear friends, so I was so struck by your telling of it, where just you saw everything as love.
yeah, that's it. I mean, that was the end point of it. By the time we went through the whole film, as it were, of and I'm back in sort of present reality with a car about to hit us, and this all happened before the impact.
Yeah, interesting.
Um, it was absolutely clear that everything that had ever transpired and everything that was transpiring now, down to like the dust, the dust particles on the dashboard of the car, and the details of the grass in the median between the highway, was love. Everything, everything. It was like this singular note of wholeness, like, and and I was like, you know, I was in such a relaxed space with that perception that I was like, you know, okay, you know, I wasn't even thinking that we're about to get hit by a car. It was just, I guess I'd already concluded that it was over, and I was going out on a really good note, you know.
You were
And
surrendered to death, to
yeah,
its end. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was and it wasn't there was no disappointment or self-judgment about
Yeah.
how all the life that frankly I did waste in a sense, and we can this is the new age thing like nothing's ever wasted, it's all perfect, and yet at the same time that's true, and at the same time like no, I fucking wasted a lot of moments, a lot, could have been very different. It was fine, and then boom, impact. And it's funny, I do remember hitting my head really hard on the right side. No bruising though. That was which was
Hmm.
strange, and the window didn't break, but it concussed me, knocked me out. And next thing I know, they're dismantling our car, and the paramedics are taking us out, and I'm come to. I just don't know anything, don't know my name. I only know that that's my mom over there. And yeah, it's like we were in the ambulance together, and she called out for me. And, basically I said I'm okay twice, and it was clear that she registered the second one because her breathing changed from like really struggling to she just let go. And I didn't know that she was going in that moment because I didn't know much. I was really concussed and stupid. Um, but I also had that thing where like people have where I was in on the gurney with the thing holding my head down. And yeah, at the same time, my awareness was like at the top of the ambulance, like
Mm-hmm.
in this kind of dispersed sort of place, both at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she said something, it wasn't like it had to travel into my brain. It was like it was emanating from inside me already. Her voice was already inside me. There was no space for it to travel. And when she let go, I felt this, I can't describe it any better than a weird whoosh. There was like a whoosh. And I didn't put two and two together in that moment because that whoosh was obviously, in a sense, her soul, moving out of that, really broken body that
Yeah.
she had. And so then we're in the hospital and everything just goes from there. That was the hardest moment of my life. May end up being the hardest moment, actually, no matter what happens after this. Right now,
Yeah.
in some ways, who knows? Uh, I don't know. And so. You know, um, I appreciated the good people from Lutheran Social Services trying to come and give me hugs, but I did not want any hugs
You're
at
like,
the
I don't want
time.
hugs right
I
now.
actually did not want hugs, and we go out, and the next several days were just like just being bathed in shock and grief, and all these other things that are there, not computing exactly
Yeah.
what's going on. It's a very dreamy space, thinking like, maybe I'm going to wake up the next day
Yeah.
and things it'll all have been a dream, didn't happen. And so, like maybe I'm like a week to 10 days past, and then I start to notice parts of my experience that I'm like, I didn't know that was part of shock. And so there's weird things going on, strange things afoot, and I noticed that my sense of I wasn't really defensive, particularly. I mean, I could actually mouth defensive words and give teenage sass or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, but it wasn't it was so far outside of where I was sitting. I
Yeah.
was it was as if also like the back of my there was no back of my head and no back of my heart. It was like if I put my awareness or attention to these places, I would go back and back and back into something. That was the
Yeah.
experience. Very interesting, very strange. And I wasn't dissociated either. I was like more present than I'd been. I was like in my body in a
There
way.
you
And
go. That's the key. Yeah, you were in your
I
body. You
I was
weren't
in my
dissociated.
and the weird thing was like I mean I realized that I was still it hadn't worn off. I mean I basically had all the fear taken off of me
Ah,
in the ND in the life review and that was still pretty much that way, and it was such to have that for maybe a couple months or more was a profound gift because also on the like I was seeing the contrast still. Like every day I was like, my God, I've been so afraid, and I've had a relatively easy life.
uh-huh.
Like whoa, my goodness, night
Huh.
and day, and so it was a really interesting thing to have social interactions in a different place with people. And for a
Yeah.
while, it was pretty easy to be both a teenager and whatever was going on. And there was also bliss. I mean, this is the first time in a long time that I don't think I had the word bliss much at the time. I did actually, because I was going to ask my dad a question. We were in the backyard, and I was about to ask him, "Are you feeling this bliss too?" And um, I made it as far as, "Dad, are you?" The Y part, and then this
Oh,
voice inside came up real quick and said, "He absolutely is not. And it's actually probably good you keep some of these experiences close to the vest so that you can, so that that people don't interfere with what you're experiencing now. Because
so this
you're
wisdom arose that like
very quickly." And I was like, okay, and
so
and I
you
and I
you
did.
weren't sharing this with people that
Nope.
you were experiencing bliss. Yeah.
No, no, not my,
Bliss
a
and
few
grief.
drips here and there, little drips here and there, but not even with my best friends. It was not, and it was not a. It was just, I was like, no, I'm gonna let this thing. It has to germinate. It has to. It needs some space, and so let's see what happens with it. And so yeah, it was interesting to go through the stages of grief, like in a textbook, and I'd be like in out in our garage, banging on the plywood walls hard with my fist
Yeah.
in profound anger at
Yeah.
having had my mother taken away, and at the same time there was this kind of perfect calm underneath it all. And so the way I described it at the time, and I would now too, was like it was like being behind a swiftly moving waterfall in like a cave. That's that where you can just sit in that cave perfectly dry and watch this water just flow without any kind of opposition. And I'm very grateful I had that time because I wasn't taught well. I wasn't conditioned well to feel a whole bunch of feelings, grief included,
Mhm.
and the various emotions that are connected to it. And so, just for a few months, I think I was able to, have a lot of what wanted to get processed, come
Yes.
through,
Yeah.
because after 3 months, I was taken out of paradise, and then life was shit. I
Uh-huh.
mean, life was jagged. It was worse than if I'd not known that contrast.
Yes.
And it was, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so this is I mean, a near death experience for you, which also it is really in line with an awakening experience that people
Yes.
have, and a
Yes.
moment of awakening. And even the aftermath is very similar to what you and I see when we work with people who have had an awakening. It's there's this honeymoon phase in which
Yeah.
everything is so our humanity is still arising because, spoiler alert, that's not going to go away no matter how awake you are. Um, but but there was this capacity for it, this vastness that was here, and even
Yeah.
this bliss, there was space for it. But then it shut back down, which also tends to happen when people have a pretty profound opening like that and they think that there's something wrong. But it's kind of par for the course. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember one fellow, and for the life of me, I can't remember who they were. Just strange. But somebody asked me on the playground. It was still summer, so school wasn't in. I was walking to the library, and somebody kind of noticed something had been going on. I didn't,
yeah,
really say much, but they're like, basically, we're asking, how can I have some of that? You
they
know,
could tell that
and
something was going on. Yeah.
so they could tell something. Like I think what I talked about was like the fear was gone. And so like my answer to them was basically, well, just like go get in a car accident and just don't die. And that'll be
Just
that'll do
that's
it.
all. I can see you, the guru on the mountaintop in the Himalayas saying, like, go get in a car accident. That
Yeah,
is,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so we both laughed because it's, really really bad advice typically.
yeah,
And so it was actually in that moment, like as after I said those things like that, again, that inner voice from that same place kind of came up and said, like, so you're going to be forgetting a lot of what you're experiencing right now. You're gonna lose a lot of this, but it's for good purpose. It's basically saying because you need to come back to this in a way that's repeatable and teachable. And that doesn't require, you know, Fight Club style getting in a car and driving into a brick
right.
wall, or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
So Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is so profound. You lost your mom at such a pivotal
Mm.
age, which is completely devastating and such a trauma. And to have trauma and awakening intertwined like that, I mean,
Messy.
yeah, that's
For me,
super
for me
messy.
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
how do you feel that's played out in then in the years to come? Would you come up upon these moments of samadhi and bliss again and sort of, be traumatized a little bit? Were the signals getting crossed, the wires getting crossed at any point, or
Hmm.
how did it play out for you?
That would have been interesting. Now that didn't happen so much.
Yeah,
When I would go into the samadhi places, it was not uh, pressing another button that it ought not to have. I I think mainly they kept in different camps. It was just that there was so much grief. It was just there was a mountain of grief that had to be moved through, and
sure.
I think that oftentimes if I did go into some deep space, it's not that it like had a weird wiring, but it would if I went into a sufficiently relaxed space internally, it's like then the body would assert and say like we got to dump a lot of this tension because you're carrying around a lot,
Yeah.
and in sort of even as a teenager in I don't know the school that I was in and the programs that I was in, there's a lot of like go go go, and there's a lot of like you need
Push
to
through.
be you push through and need to be productive. And
Yeah.
so I ignored, in a way, I ignored, I mean, I didn't even know that was what was happening. But
Yeah.
I was not wise enough to sort of surf and know how to stop. I didn't know any formal meditation. I didn't know a lot of self-care. I didn't know how to take a break. And so I think I had a big break enforced upon me in my freshman year of high school.
Mm.
Um, and at first it was innocently, I think I was I sucked on like a lollipop or that was a community lollipop. And guess what? I got mononucleosis, not even in some kind of fun way, but
The
like
kissing disease.
fuck, yeah,
Yeah.
the kissing disease. And yeah, and so mononucleosis itself knocked me out of school for a bit, but somehow it got paired with what I was interpreting as a depression, which it was, but that depression was actually rooted in he needs to he needs to drop out. He needs to tune in, turn out, and drop out in a way. I wasn't taking LSD,
In
but
retreat. Yeah.
I need to be in retreat. So and so it ended up I missed a lot of school my freshman year, and it was also good for my ego or bad for my ego depending on who you ask
Yeah.
because part of my ego was that he's one of the best students and he's good at everything, and suddenly I find myself getting a D in geometry, not having any motivation to do any of my homework for any of my classes. All I wanted to do was watch In Search of or Sightings or you know read spiritual books and stuff like that, and the Tao Te Ching and other things. I was only motivated for that, and there was something beautiful in it. Of course, at the egoic level, I was like kicking myself. It's like you idiot, what's wrong with you?
It
What's
was your
wrong with you?
identity. Part of your identity was good student, smart guy, smart
Yeah,
kid, good
absolutely,
kid.
absolutely, and like to pass my geometry class. And I think maybe I don't know if I got all the answers perfect. I know I got some of them right, but like I needed to get a really high grade on the final test in order to pass with a D minus.
Oh my
That shows you how far
God.
behind I was. And so I was like praying to God, like, if you want me to like fail this class, I've been doing this for you. And if there's somebody out there, I've been doing this for the quest. But if you want me to pass, you're going to have to hook me up with some good advice here, some magic. And immediately after saying that, I got like this kind of at the end, the voice came in, and also kind of from the outside, it's like, okay, here's what you're doing. Take the geometry book, stick it under the pillow, sleep on it. But also, when you wake up, you need to go into your closet or in the linen thing in the bathroom. You need to dress up as Pythagoras tomorrow, as best you can. And I was like, all right, okay, I'm doing it. And so that's what I did. And I
You're
remember
such a unique kid.
God, I now I'm thinking, looking back, I'm thinking, is this a false memory? Did I really do that? Because I knew I was
Knowing
wearing,
you, you probably did. You probably
I
did.
might have, but I'm even skeptical now. But I was wearing pats and I was wearing this golden Greek key shirt, but I also put on a bed sheet and tied it like a Roman toga. Obviously, it's not
Yeah.
historically accurate. And I remember sitting down for that test, and I on the table, but in front of this, in the space in front of me, were the test answers. Some of them. Maybe I'm still always skeptical of this because I'm thinking the teacher just kind of thought I was a good kid and just like let it slide and give me a D minus so I could just move on. So, but I was copying down literally like D delta C, greater than or equal to
Because
blank blank.
you could see it. You could
I
see,
was seeing it as if it was in the
yes.
space in front of me, and I was just copying down what I
Clairvoyant.
was seeing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still skeptical that they were the right answers, and so,
Yeah, who
but
knows?
I'd never had that before though, like that. It was the darndest thing. I could still see the body of the person in front of me through it, but it was like somebody put like a slide projector sheet with marker
Yeah.
on it, and I was just reading and copying. I was the second one done with the test, handed it in, and maybe it was all shit, but it was
What
the
was your
darndest thing.
grade?
Well, that's the thing. It's like I got a good grade on it, but I don't know if I deserved it or he was just like, hooking a brother up there. He's like, oh, he's a good kid. He's just been depressed,
Yeah.
So
Who knows?
anyhow,
But
that was a weird year. Here's something weird for those listening. That particular geometry textbook, um, as I moved forward in the class, I started to notice a weird patterning in it. Eventually, I finally just was so curious that I opened it to where the epicenter of it. I don't know why I didn't do that before. It was weird, but somebody had previously killed a goldfish by smashing it in the middle of the book, and it had fossilized. And that was a
yikes.
strange synchronistic symbol because during that year of school, in particular, the first 2 years of high school, I was having such a feeling of connectiveness to Christ consciousness. And this is for somebody who grew up thinking Christianity was just like not so great,
Yeah.
and and yet through Edgar Casey, essentially through the Casey readings, uh, and so of course the fish being a symbol of Christ and all that kind of thing. It was just an interesting year, because that
Interesting.
was that was like the capper on the year is having this bizarre textbook with a fossilized goldfish.
Yeah, I guess, hey, instead of when your goldfish dies, don't flush it down the toilet, put it in the middle of a textbook.
Put it in the middle of a Houghton Mifflin honors geometry textbook.
Why
Yes.
not? Why not?
So, yeah,
Well, you mentioned Edgar Casey. I mean, you have
yeah,
a proclivity toward like Blavatsky and Casey, and
yes,
also Yogananda,
yes,
and
yes.
Ramana Maharshi, and you're rooted in Vedanta, and yet you're, open to all of this. Did this love of I mean, when did you find out about the Blavatsky and
Oh, strange
Casey
thing.
and
And Blavatsky came first, which was bizarre. And in fact, it was part of a Christmas present my sixth grade year before my mom died, I think. My aunt, and I hope she doesn't think that it's like she's part of the reason why my life fell apart or something like that. Made bad choices. But I love my aunt, all of them. But she gave me The Secret Doctrine as a Christmas present. Now, I
Mhm.
opened the book and I couldn't, honestly, I couldn't follow it. That first year, no, I wasn't there yet. He also gave me Isis Unveiled, which was more
Okay.
palatable. I could digest it a bit better.
Uh-huh.
Years later, I came back to them and read them, and because I was a more advanced reader, I could make it through and understand what she was. I don't think she's the best writer, but I could make it through what she was doing. So somehow she came first, and it was even from the get-go, there was just there without even though I wasn't understanding the book, there was a strange. If I heard her name, I and
Something
saw
would
her picture on
happen.
the back there, I
Yeah.
had like, I feel like I know this person. It was the darndest thing. And so it sat there on my shelf looking at me essentially. And
Yeah.
and then Casey came. How did he come out? Yeah, it was one of the first books I grabbed off the shelf at the metaphysical bookstore. And also again, when I saw that one of the classic pictures of him, I think he's sitting in a chair. He's older Edgar Cayce. I'm like, okay, he felt like this is one of my tribe as well.
Yes.
And, and so I did spend an inordinate amount of time um, reading. He didn't write books. He gave readings, and so later scholars associated with the Association for Research of Enlightenment made thematic compilations
Yeah.
that they kind of mined from individual readings. But I read some of these compilation books. It was just I couldn't get my fill at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yogananda came much later when I was more mature, after I'd been meditating already, and I'm glad about that because I was doing a lot of hard ass Zen meditation at age 17 and 18, and I was fasting a lot and waking up at 3 in the morning and taking cold showers and doing 4 to 6 hours a day, along with my school and
Wow.
schoolwork. And then Yogananda came into my life because I literally I was going too hard. I was too tight as Buddha,
Yeah.
listening to the
Yeah.
music teacher. Yeah, definitely it was going to get to the point where it's too tight, it's going to break.
Strings are too tight. Yeah.
Yeah. And so somehow just cracking open and reading autobiography of a yogi, even the first sentences, the first page even was like,
A transmission.
whoa, yeah. It was amazing. I'd never had such a transmission from a book. I'd actually get transmissions and fits and starts from reading Emerson,
Mm. Yeah.
Ralph Waldo, and Whitman. Well, but when I found Yogananda, it was just like, whoa! It was the floodgates opened, and even though I didn't know Kriya Yoga, and wasn't getting any instructions from the book, somehow my existing very ascetic, hard-assed meditations were being transformed, and my approach to them, how I did them, and there was this that would now instead of just being dry saltine cracker meditations of an ascetic, there were these like flows of energy, like heavy flows of this like honey-like
Yeah.
energy down into my head or up through my body, down, down the soles of my feet. After that, I would like if I would watch like a beautiful movie, like I remember the first time I watched Baraka,
Mm. Beautiful.
and
Yeah.
I was sitting here watching Baraka. Whoa, masses of movement up my legs, into my torso, out my head, down. The first time I watched Gandhi, Richard
Hmm.
Attenborough's '82 film.
Yeah. Same thing.
Knocked, same thing. And it wasn't just profound stuff like that. It would sometimes just be, like something accidentally profound in a sitcom or whatever, or being exposed or some
Why not?
dumbass movie. Like I remember Hudson Hawk, of all films.
That's not
I,
a great film.
no, oh, come on, it's a great film. It's a great film. We're going to agree to disagree on that. But come on, timing your burglaries to swinging on a star. Now that's just
Yeah.
creative.
Okay. You have a point.
No, well, and
I think
anyhow,
that's your sister's podcast. She can talk about
yeah, she
movies
won't. That's not a
vanilla.
rom-com. That's not a
That's right.
rom-com,
That's right.
probably. But yeah, there's this one. I bring that up because there's this one time where like it was weird. Like I don't usually tell people to listen to voices because most voices are shitty to listen to. But nevertheless, again, that same voice like coming out of my heart, as if there was a space in my heart, like emanating out, and said like, watch Hudson Hawk right now. If you watch Hudson Hawk right now, you will have a profound experience of presence. And was lucky I had this girlfriend who at the time who was like really, I mean, really willing to like go with some of these weird intuitions that I was having. So we'd had a bit of a Mulder Scully thing. I got to be the Mulder,
Yeah. Yeah.
the woman was the rationalist. But she'd go with these things, and indeed I did have one from nothing, but nothing to do with the film, but it was almost more to do with the willingness to not simply listen to an inner voice, but to be open to the space from which it comes.
To
And
be
and
open
and
to the space from which it comes.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I got lots of little. That's where sometimes I bring intuition together with meditation because, and why the woo comes to where the woo comes together with
Yeah.
more serious spirituality.
Yeah.
For me is that the presence is a profound reservoir of all sorts of other little things, and,
Yes.
and, and that presence often wants to deepen itself by moving through us. That's Shakti. The silence deepens itself by our willingness to be moved by it, and let the words come out without editing them.
Yeah.
or even little things like sometimes it is like I need to turn left at this street. It does come down to those things and like let yourself do that. And
Yeah.
go ahead and do. I remember years later, this is a little thing, but one of many in life is I needed a job. I was actually in my monkish days. I was driving on Highway 101 in Oregon, and I saw to my left the Bay House restaurant, which was like this great fine dining restaurant on the coast. It had no help wanted sign, but something that space from the space, it said like, make a Yui as safely and quickly as you can and go in there and ask for a job. And so I did that, no resistance. I walked in, I met the head waiter right away. He took a real shining to me. He was like, oh, he took me into back. I thought I was going to be a chef there because that's what I was. I asked the head chef if I could get any small or lowly job in the kitchen because I was willing to work. He's like, well, I like your attitude, but we've got all our positions filled. But why don't you go back and talk to the head waiter? And because maybe we should get you in here. I got a waiting job there. It was like wonderful. I was actually making a ton of money
Great.
as a
Good,
fine
good you
dining
listen to
waiter.
that voice.
Yeah, and but more than that, more than actually just getting some job or whatever, that's less the point. And actually, what the real point was, it was one of those places where you walk into the environment and every one of your steps feels seamless, and every person that you meet, there's a sense of like, I'm absolutely supposed to be meeting this person right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's not like everybody's your meeting is like Ramana Maharshi or Yogananda or some perfect sage. It doesn't have to be like that. It like, and nor was I, but like there was a sense of like, no, this is a harmonious flow, and this is good for everybody here right now.
Yes.
And so yeah, that's to me like a high level synchronicity is also where
Yeah.
space where that spaciousness and intuition want to come together.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
synchronicity, because that's really what it's about, being in flow, being aligned, and it doesn't it's especially when we lift these um assessments about how it should look or
Yeah.
what this means. Or, oh, I need to make a U-turn because I'm going to meet the woman of my dreams or the man of my dreams, or I'm going to get the job that changes my life. I mean, it's like we tend to place these large, but it's just like, this is the next right thing for me to do. I'm just supposed to make a U-turn and walk in there. And
Yeah.
what I hear from you and it's important that people who want to live in alignment and live intuitively understand this. And hopefully, I think they're probably getting it from you, is that when you would get these intuitive hunches, they weren't rooted in fear and contraction.
No.
They were coming from a more expansive place or almost a neutral place
Yeah.
at times.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, I'll certainly use the word relaxed. And
Yeah.
even if it was dynamically relaxed, so neutral in that
Yeah.
way is a good one. Like for instance, I had another one that was very significant. I was 17 or 18. I was 17, and it was just before I'd take up like 4 to 6 hours of meditation. And so at that time, I was thinking, I didn't have like a beat on where I was going to be the next year. Like I was looking at colleges and I was researching things, but it's not like I wasn't interested in that. I very much was, but my heart was like, no, it just doesn't feel like where you're going. And so
Yeah.
I remember I was walking through Walmart of all places, and it just came to me like again one of these things where the words come through me or the thoughts come through me. It was like, where am I going to be a year from now? And to my surprise, I was given like a full answer and even displayed
Yeah.
in the space in front of me and with an obnoxious radio voice narrator who's like, funny that you asked, like that, and it was like, you're going to be working in a mostly vegetarian, with the words, a mostly vegetarian cafe with a bunch of monks, many of whom wear all white clothing. You'll start out as a dishwasher, but you'll get trained in all the jobs until you apprentice with a master chef and eventually become the chef. And I could see I had this image of looking outside like a ticket window where you'd put the food and where the bell is at a juice bar,
Yeah.
somebody behind the bar, somebody walking by. It's a very specific scene. Plants, yeah, it was extremely specific. And I thought, well, that's highly unlikely. I'm not gonna, you know, I figured it's going to tell me I'm going to go to the University of Wisconsin-Madison or Williams College or something, Cornell, I don't know. And I was like, well, not likely, but thanks for answering, you know.
Yeah,
And
thanks a lot.
so I just forgot about that, you know, and then I was on the phone interviewing. It was almost a year later. I was interviewing with somebody who was living in an ashram on the Oregon coast. I was in Seattle at the time. And the last thing he said, you know, after saying, well, come on down for an in-person interview. You know, you sound like you could be a really good fit. And the last thing he said, oh, by the way, we're about to open up a cafe. You know, we might need like a dishwasher or something. And that is at that moment, I completely remember that thing from the Walmart. I was like,
Oh,
I
right.
did, I did, yeah, all right. So, yeah, that kind of, yeah, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I was in a neutral place there, and that many of those
Yeah.
things have then would proceed to happen in that very cafe, and that cafe became a nexus of high strangeness that was emanating out of presence and pushing you back into presence.
Yeah.
And what a wonderful monastic playground, learning ground that proved to be.
Yeah. While
Yeah.
doing karma yoga.
While doing karma yoga and also fulfilling another desire I'd had since I was a kid, watching. I'm going to cite the Frugal Gourmet, even though the chef got into a lot of shit afterwards. But yeah, but it was one of my mom's favorite cooking shows. So we watched the Frugal Gourmet together, and developed a love for TV chefs and cooking, and I had this sense of wanting to be a chef someday.
Mm.
And so you know, when this opportunity came, I was like, well, I love washing dishes, and then it's like, oh, I love making salads, and eventually I love working in a kitchen 16 hours a day.
Yes.
So you know,
And
and learning, yeah,
it led to you becoming a monk.
yes,
And we probably should wrap up here pretty soon. We could talk about all the crazy experiences and
yeah,
wonderful mystical experiences that you've had since, but I really want to, I guess, ask you, how do you feel these earlier mystical experiences informed or supported you as you eventually opened up into unity consciousness in an abiding
mm,
way,
mm,
thanks to your practice. And that's what this path is about, right? We
yeah,
can
yeah,
focus on all the bells and whistles of like this cool thing happened here and this cool thing happened there, but these weren't superfluous, side things that happened. They're all part of a seamless flow that led you to the
yeah,
next right step and the next right step and the next right step, which helped you open up into non-duality,
yeah.
an abiding way. So yeah.
I could describe I think the entire human spiritual path using the word saturation, essentially. And so it's every little step is every little incursion that we make into presence in whatever way it comes
Yeah.
is just another degree of saturation along the way. Whether it takes 4 years for a person or 40, you know, depends on the person and, you know, karmas and whatever else you want to get into and
Yeah.
just what needs to happen. Um, and so like I can look back on some of these experiences that have these woo in it, but you know, being based in sort of presence, they were just like getting bombed with presence or getting saturated presence from so many different angles that eventually it starts to uh, you know become more the norm. And so I often like that the very common analogy people use when they will say something like, at first I was experiencing myself as a wave that would visit the ocean or dive into the ocean, and then at some point it felt more like I was the ocean living through a wave. You know, and that's a very common analogy, and I think
Mhm.
it's a very good one.
Yeah.
And so it's not like anything fundamentally changes in what is. It's just like we relax sufficiently, we get saturated sufficiently so that you know the framing you know the framing is different, the lens is different. And
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like you held relaxation, in high regard this whole time. Like you knew that that was the sweet spot of relaxing in some way and softening, opening, allowing, which is so key.
yeah,
And I don't hear a lot of like, I mean, I guess one could hear your story and go, well, of course he was a seeker. that there wasn't that graspy seeking energy.
Oh,
It
just because
doesn't
I haven't
feel
talked
like
about
that.
it. No, no. I mean, my training was to relax, right? But I
Yeah,
came in as a type A person. I don't think that's a bad thing because it's like, give me a
it
meditation
got you
technique,
on
I
the
will do the
path.
fuck up. I'm going to do the
Yeah,
fuck out of it too. I ain't gonna be
yeah.
lazy about it. I ain't gonna shirk on my sun salutations. It's going to be maximum effort. And I think that don't give that up. If you're out there and somebody tells you, no, use
Good.
that, use
Yeah,
that.
so I want people to know that it's like it wasn't, you weren't relaxed the whole time, but at some point you found it to be the balm needed to
Yeah,
open
yeah.
further.
You
Yeah,
and you can if you channel your effort into methods of relaxation, well, there you go. I
there you
mean that's
go.
that's essentially what it was. And certainly sometimes when you wake up at like 6 in the morning and you're feeling creaky and you get into start doing a sun salutation or whatever, I mean that doesn't necessarily feel like relaxing. There's a lot
No.
of things
Yeah.
that don't feel good initially, but are often very, very good
Yes.
for the system. So I think everybody has to probably have a lot of those interventions.
Yeah.
Buddha was right, Siddhartha was right to start to kick himself in the ass a little bit. He just overdid it, and then he
Yeah,
and
he
then he
went the
pulled back.
ascetic way. Yeah.
But he didn't pull back to being a couch potato, either. He
Right.
pulled back into like a moderated, balanced practice regimen.
Yeah. A
So.
middle, a middle way.
And the middle way can look different for each and every one of us. Like some of us.
That
Um,
is the truth. Well, I feel like I want to have you on again. We can talk about parallel lives. We can talk about getting downloads and dreams. I mean, you and I were sharing some dream space right before the pandemic for like about a
yeah.
year of both of us in the Himalayas being
Yes.
taught by masters or something. And then I don't know, I'd
Yeah.
wake up and be like, Ish, that dream last
Yeah.
week, what the hell?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
or these,
And
crazy,
yeah.
what were you going to say?
And the times that I thought I saw you in Europe and had to double
Well,
take, and other interesting things, all sorts of weirdness going on,
well,
and
somebody, a
may or may
being
not talk about.
an ascended master had come to me and taught me a meditation practice, and I said, "What is this for?" And I heard bilocation, and I said, I can barely handle being in one place at once. I have ADHD and I'm autistic. Come on." I did the practice, and then after the practice, I said, "Well, that was weird. I don't feel like I'm anywhere else, but I think I have
Yeah.
to tell Ishtar about this." And then you contacted me a few days later and said, I saw you in Europe, but
Yeah.
it wasn't your body, it was your consciousness shining through all these different people. But yeah, so some of these things are strange, and I guess just want to highlight that there's soul family that
Yeah.
you meet up with, and I think it feels like we're at a time on this planet where a lot of us are meeting up with soul family people again, and
Yeah.
that it's important and to listen to that. We have some sort of resonance, some
Yes.
connection, and you've had people like that in your life. If you can just maybe just tell us a little bit about Austin,
Oh
because
God.
Austin was somebody very special.
That's a hoot. Yeah. So I grew up in a small town. At the time of my living there, it was like 5,000. So it's one of these towns in the Midwest where, like maybe not everybody knows everybody, but like there's a good chance that everybody knows each other's business in certain ways. So this Austin, before long before I met him, he was known as sort of like a notorious town asshole. Now, when I met him, that wasn't the case anymore. First thing he said to me as he was walking up to the steps of Heart and Soul, the Lake Geneva Metaphysical Bookstore, was, "The trees are going to sleep right now." And it wasn't just in a bullshit way. I almost had the sense that when he said that, his consciousness was somehow in the trees, and so was I when it was weird. Um, in any event, eventually I got to know him. He tells me the story, and he said he's a walk-in. I said, like, well, what's a walk-in? And then he said, like, well, he often called his previous self the old asshole. Well, the old asshole was at the hospital doing the stress test for a heart attack, and he just died, had a heart attack doing the stress test. And he said, I came down And he came out, and his framing was that they had some sort of agreement. And he said, like, well, we're different aspects or different octaves of the same soul, which is an
Hmm.
interesting framing. That's how
Different
he described it.
octaves
We're
of the
different.
same soul.
We're different octaves of
Yeah.
the same soul. That's why this arrangement can be made. It'll be commensurable. And so he's like, I still remember all the details of my life, and I can use that personal pronoun and stuff. But I mean, ultimately, I still have the sense of like coming in as a discrete, as a different being altogether. And so he
Yeah.
came in, and he had interesting knowledge apparently of like Navajo native ritual. And of course, he told me this story, which I take everything with a grain of salt, but like the story he had was like, well, the old asshole was in General Crook's army, or Cook, I forget the general who was in the Southwest fighting Native
Yeah.
Americans, and the old asshole shot me, and I was a medicine man, and he killed me. And so a deal was struck that, it was not so great to, do that. But so, you go out, and then I come into your body and use it for, some the rest of the time. And so that was the space that I met him in,
Interesting.
he'd been down to the Southwest. I don't know how reenmeshed, if at any he'd quite gotten in with the tribe. He said he did have some connections who kind of recognized him for what he was. But he was mainly up in Wisconsin. He worked with a lot of people that I never met, turned out, which was very cool. But I was like 16 or 15, 16, and he was like 54. And I just go over to his house, and as soon as I would get into 100 feet of the house, it was like I was walking through like a force field into a magical realm. It was bizarre and wonderful. And so lots of weird stuff happened at his house. I would just sit at his kitchen table across from him and feel presence. I didn't know that I was actually feeling like samadhi had been cranked up and just like broadcast into the environment. I didn't
Yeah.
know the words I could use. I just know, oh, I like this.
Yeah.
And then all sorts of stuff would happen in that space. Like he would do this thing where he'd say like, so and so's about to call me. I said, is it a planned call? He's like, no. And then the phone would ring, and it was so and so. And there would often be people he hadn't talked to in a long time. So a lot of that happened. He had this amazing skill of finding my retainer. So I had to wear this retainer. It was very uncomfortable. I didn't like wearing it. It was a plastic thing. But if I lost it, I'd freak out because like, oh, my dad's going to be pissed at me. And it was hard to find because it was transparent and kind of light. And so he'd never been inside my house. I had never described the layout of my house. But I would call him in a panic state, and he would say, "Hold on," you know. And he'd say like, in your TV room, it's under the front left leg of the blue couch. I went and looked, and he said it's in a pile of papers. And I searched. And I said, Austin, for once you're wrong, it's not there. And he said, no, 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 you're not very good at looking. It's in the Newsweek. I didn't tell him there was a Newsweek, and I went. Sure enough, it was there in the Newsweek. And this, God, this happened probably 6 or 7 times.
Uh-huh.
I
So
look back and
something was
I'm
going on. Something was going on with Austin. You had a connection
something.
with him. He was connected to something deep because you were feeling that transmission,
Yeah.
and
I was having what I didn't know. I was having probably what people would now call like Kundalini stuff going on.
okay. Yeah.
I didn't know that. I just felt like there was all this energy, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it would get a bit uncomfortable. Not like some people complain, but it'd just be like my remedy for a while was I would go to his house, and he might be like underneath his truck, his beloved truck, working on it. And I was like, Austin, I got to get some couch time. And I would go into like, because his house felt like some temple. And I'd go in there and I'd sleep on
Yeah.
this couch for 20 minutes, and I'd come out feeling like $1 million.
Yeah.
And then I'd walk out with like a lot of pep in my step, and I'd say, hey, thanks, Austin. He'd say like, yeah, you're welcome, freeloader. He knew I was a kid. I didn't really have any money. He didn't really charge me much for anything. Didn't charge me for anything
But he
really. He
was sort
charged
of
me.
your energy healer slash teacher slash sensei
He was a
for some.
teacher, and
Yeah.
we never used any formalized language like that or whatever. But looking back, I was like, yeah, that was a teacher. I even was initiated into some things, into
Yeah.
some meditation practices and energetic meditation practices. So more what people would think of as woo, but good heavens, like, and there was,
They helped you. They
they
supported you.
helped me. And
Yeah.
he never used the term Kundalini. That wasn't really his tradition.
Right.
I don't even know if he probably knew the word, but never used it. And I didn't know it, but I look back and think like he was definitely giving me little techniques that helped to
Yeah.
balance things out. And
Yeah.
I remember one time, this happened a lot as a kid, as I would find myself in sleep traveling to different places. Like I would go to these cities or like classrooms or something, but I call them
Yeah.
cities because they're like big classrooms, like
Yeah.
and with architectural features for whatever reason. And I would sometimes I'd go to this one in the Himalayas, and then other times, then I started going to one that was right above my lake, and there was like a long like cord of light, and then there's something docked on it. And I would find myself coming
Yeah.
back in the morning from that place. And again, I gave myself like, oh, these are just those interesting dreams, like where I'm teaching things and learning things that doesn't
Yes.
isn't usual in my. One time I woke up and the word on my mouth was botany because I just woke up after giving apparently what was a banger of a talk on the spiritual botany of the future. And I was talking about how gardeners and farmers are eventually going to be perceiving the subtle bodies of plant life and being able to change things at the etheric layer instead of genetically, and that this would be a much more efficient and salubrious method. And I had like diagrams that
Good.
were like holographs, and I had no interest in this stuff at the time. That's why I said botany. And so, I left it at that. The next day, as soon as I see Austin, he says to me, "That was a nice talk you gave on the ship last night." And I said, "Like, what ship?" And he said, "The one that's floating above the lake." And I said, "Oh, you mean the city?" And because I couldn't understand his interpretation. He's always too into aliens. So he's interpreting
Oh
everything in
my
ships.
goodness. Oh my goodness.
Maybe he was right. I don't know. And so I was like, "Yeah, what was that?" He said, "Yeah, botany." I didn't really understand what you were talking about, but it seemed pretty good, And I was like, "All right, yeah, well, thank you for that." And another one of the great psychics, who I wish I knew more, but he was a wonderful guide, was my qigong teacher, whose name was Walter Matthew Brown. And and I remember one time he just point blank said, "Hey Thomas, oh, I get a sense you see the city above the lake. Do you see the column of light going up of the lake?" I said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do, Walter." He said, like, "That's good. That's good." Just
Like the
he was
dude from the Big Lebowski or something.
he was yeah, he was with me. He's very laid back. He was very laid
Yeah.
back.
Laid
Yeah, he
back.
was he was one of the great local psychics too. He was the one that people would call on if they had a difficult haunting. And he
Ah,
would go in and take care of it. And yeah, but also a wonderful qigong teacher.
yeah.
So, yeah, yeah.
So I wanted to bring you into this series because you are somebody who's so deeply, deeply rooted in presence and in non-dual awakening.
Yeah.
And look at all this weird shit that's happened that you opened up to that perhaps you attracted. Not everybody's going to have such a colorful
No.
life. So not
Yeah.
everybody who is a mystic is going to have these types of experiences.
No.
So if you're seeking wacky, well, if you want to meet a walk-in who helps you find your retainer or your car keys, or,
That's right.
visit aliens at night when you're dreaming, chill the fuck out. That being a mystic can come in very small, very subtle ways as well.
Yeah, the most wonderful thing is like finding presence while chopping onions and sinking into the transcendent and having it saturate all parts of your experience. And that's a very simple, grounded thing. And that is where freedom is. Freedom is in sinking into that presence. And so, yeah, don't have to be psychic, you know.
Yeah,
But then to those who are having psychical experiences and are also on the path, would say, don't have to repress them either. You could that might be part of your classroom, you
that's
know.
right. Everybody's different. Everybody has a
Yeah,
different wiring. Everybody's come in
yeah,
differently. So if there are mystical, psychical experiences, energetic experiences opening up, you know,
yeah.
you open up to meet them. So thank you. Ishtar. I'm going to link to your website. You teach ascension meditation. You
Do-
also have awakened light astrology. Your
I
astrology
do.
readings are incredible. You also use your intuitive gifts when you do the astrological readings, which I always appreciate. And thank you so much, my dear
Thank
friend,
you. And
for being part of this.
I should shamelessly, because it is shameless, I should
Please
shamelessly plug.
do.
I also have a nascent YouTube channel and a
I'm
budding
going to put a link.
Substack. So
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 YouTube channel, Substack, all of that's going to get linked. So you have the two
yeah,
websites, Substack, YouTube, and you're going to be in India pretty soon.
yeah.
Is there room on the retreat for people coming up? This is probably
Oh,
gonna, I mean,
there
I guess
this
it's going to start
there's like one
before.
or there's like one or two spaces, and this might start before, but like we'll be there the month of February, and not everyone's coming the whole month. So people, if this is in time, there may be some Valentine's Day to February 28th slots open by the time you're listening to this.
There you
So,
go. All right, I
yeah.
like it. I still want to meet you there, but I'm
I
wearing
wish.
something I bought in India in honor of
Ah,
our connection today. All right, thank you for being my guest on Confessions of a Modern Mystic, Ishtar Ashaya, aka Thomas Howell. Ish, Ishi.
yes.
I love you and thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, share it with someone who you feel might benefit, and leave a comment. Let me know how you're doing on your path. I always love hearing from you. And thanks for watching.